The morning Warren Alderman asked me if I could still ride. I had been working his family's land for 22 years. He stood at the head of the kitchen table in a suit jacket he had no business, wearing an April in Kansas. Flanked by a lawyer from Wichita and 3 cousins who hadn't visited this farm in the better part of a decade, he looked at me the way he had always looked at me, like I was a stray the family had tolerated long past the point of usefulness. I didn't answer right away. That's something the land teaches you, if you spend enough years listening to it. Silence before a response isn't weakness. It's evidence that you know what you're carrying. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Stories like mine don't begin at the kitchen table. They begin in the dirt. They begin with a man you loved without reservation, and a piece of ground he believed in when everyone around him called it worthless. They begin with 22 years of mornings that nobody outside a fence line will ever fully know. My name is Nora Alderman. I came to the Callaway County farm as a 24-year-old woman with nothing in particular behind me and nothing guaranteed in front. I married Daniel Alderman in May of 2002 in the small Methodist church at the edge of the property, in a ceremony with 30 guests and a reception that cost less than the dress his mother wore to it. Ruth Alderman made sure I understood, from the first Sunday dinner I attended, that the Aldermans had standards, that Daniel was a man with prospects and a name, that I was, in her careful phrasing, an unexpected choice. If you're enjoying the story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. She wasn't wrong that the choice was unexpected. Daniel Alderman could have married any number of women his mother would have approved of. He was a younger son, the quiet one, the one who preferred the back 40 to a party, who had his grandfather's eyes and his grandfather's habit of watching things before he said anything about them. His brother Warren was the one with the agricultural college diploma, the handshake that carried across a room, and the certainty of a man who had never been seriously wrong about anything yet. Daniel got the back section, 400 acres of rocky, alkaline ground running west to east in the county road to a limestone ridge. The Alderman family had farmed their bottom land for 3 generations and left the back section alone for most of that time. It grew scrub grass and limestone teeth, and not much else that anyone had bothered to catalog. Everyone in Callaway County understood what that land was worth. Warren said it plainly at family dinners, without unkindness, the way you'd state a fact about weather. Daniel got the bad end of the stick. Daniel didn't see it that way. He had spent 3 summers before we married pulling limestone, applying lime, testing the soil at every corner and slope. The neighbors thought he was wasting himself. His mother said it at the table in front of company. Warren told him more than once that he was putting good labor into dead ground. None of that changed what Daniel did in the morning when he put his boots on. I watched him do it, and I understood something about Daniel Alderman that none of them seemed to. He wasn't trying to prove the land was valuable. He was proving that the work itself had value, that staying with a hard thing was a form of integrity. I had grown up poor enough to know exactly what that looked like, and I fell in love with him for it more than anything else. Harold Alderman had the same understanding. Harold was Daniel's grandfather, 81 years old when I first met him, sharp as creek gravel and twice as patient. He had farmed the main operation from his early 20s to his late 60s, handed the reins to his son when his joints started giving out, and then watched his grandchildren divide what he'd built, without one saying publicly that the arrangement was unfair. He was the kind of man who made very little noise at family gatherings, but would find you afterward in the yard, at the barn, on the road home, and say the one true thing you needed. The first summer I was on the farm, he came out to where Daniel and I were pulling fence posts along the eastern boundary of the back section. He stood in the grass without announcing himself and watched us work for a few minutes. Then he said, "That piece has something nobody's bothered to look for yet." He said it to me, not to Daniel. I knew that even then. I thought about that sentence for years, the way you think about something you filed in the wrong drawer. I never forgot it, but I also never went looking for what it meant. Harold died 4 years into my marriage, 2 years after Daniel's death, and the family went through his papers at the main house with the efficiency of people who want the estate settled so they can move forward. They found his discharge papers from Korea, seed catalogs, a coffee can of foreign coins, a small photograph of a woman nobody could identify with certainty. Ruth declared the estate settled, And that was that. But Harold had not kept everything at the house. He kept a tin box in the old machine shed on the back section, under the second workbench, behind the hydraulic fluid and the spare drive belts. He had shown it to Daniel once, when Daniel was about 16. Daniel mentioned it to me the night of our wedding in the way you mentioned something you're not sure you believe yet. We were lying in the dark in the upstairs bedroom, too wired to sleep, talking the way you talk when you've just done something that cannot be undone. He said, "Grandpa showed me something once in the shed. Said it would matter someday." He said it casually, as you'd mention a legend, not a fact. I didn't ask him to explain because we were young, and someday felt abstract, and there was so much else to figure out first. 3 days later, I put in the back of my mind. 6 years after that, Daniel was dead. He was 31 years old. A Tuesday morning in October 2008, a tractor on a slope in the north pasture, a 3-second moment that ended everything we had been building. Our daughter Lily was 2 years old. She was inside the house with Ruth when it happened. I was at the county extension office, 30 miles away, asking about a soil treatment program for alkaline ground. I got the call at 10:47 in the morning. I know the time because I looked at the wall clock when the phone rang. For no reason a person can explain, except that your eyes find something solid when you're about to receive news you can't brace for. The family expected me to leave. Not cruelly, not explicitly, but the assumption was there, present in every conversation in the first weeks after the funeral. Ruth asked me twice what my plans were, using the careful voice she used when she wanted to say something she couldn't quite say directly. Warren mentioned once that the back section would need a management decision. A neighbor woman, meaning well, told me about a nice apartment complex in Emporia. Good school, she said. For Lily, I stayed. I stayed because Daniel had asked me to care for it. Because Lily had grown up going to sleep listening to the particular silence of that land. Because I had nowhere better to go, and because the back section needed someone on it, and no one else was going to come. Those were my reasons, and they were enough. Over the years, the back section changed. Not dramatically. Not the way a developer would change a piece of ground, with machinery and money, and a plan drawn up in an office building. It changed the way things change when someone pays consistent attention. The alkaline ground responded to the lime Daniel had applied, slowly, across years. The grass thickened. We started running cattle. We put up hay from the east quarter where the soil was slightly better. Daniel had planted 3 rows of windbreaks along the county road. Small trees in the first year of our marriage that were now taller than the equipment sheds. Lily learned the back section the way other children learn streets they grew up on. She knew every wet corner, every limestone shelf, every stretch of fence that needed watching every spring. By the time she was a teenager, she was working alongside me without being asked. The same quiet competence that had been her father's. We were not wealthy, not comfortable in the way you'd call a person comfortable when things aren't a constant negotiation. We were working, and the land was working back, and that was the arrangement we had with it. For 14 years after Daniel died, that arrangement held. Then Ruth Alderman had a stroke in February, lingered for 6 weeks, and died on a Tuesday in late March. And Warren came home. Warren Alderman had not been to the farm in 4 years when his mother passed. He had built a life in Wichita that suited him considerably better than Callaway County had. A company that managed agricultural land for outside investors. A house in a neighborhood with a gate. A social life built on handshakes and quarterly reports. He called Ruth every Sunday and visited at Thanksgiving and sometimes at Christmas, and she had been satisfied with that arrangement because Warren gave her the kind of attention she had always valued most, the attention that came with success. He was 54 years old at the funeral, gray at the temples, still carrying himself the way he always had, like a man who had done the math on every room he entered and confirmed he came out ahead. He shook hands at the graveside with the practiced ease of someone for whom condolences were a professional skill. He looked at me once, briefly, and nodded. That was more than I had expected from him. 2 weeks later, he arrived at my kitchen door with Ben Hartley. Ben Hartley was Warren's lawyer, a man from Wichita who carried himself with the economy of someone accustomed to delivering difficult news to people who couldn't afford good counsel. He had a leather folio and a measured voice in the manner of a doctor explaining a diagnosis he had given many times. He sat at the kitchen table and opened the folio. Ruth's estate was straightforward in most respects, Hartley said. The main operation transferred to Warren in full, as had been understood for decades. Equipment, grain contracts, credit accounts. The bottom land along the creek. All of it to Warren, documented and clear. My surface rights to the back section, which had been established informally under an arrangement Daniel's father had made before his death, remained intact for my lifetime, as previously understood. However, there was a codicil Ruth had added in 2019 at Warren's request. Upon Ruth's death, the back section would revert to consolidated Alderman family ownership, to be managed under Warren's authority. I would have 12 months' notice before any change of use. Change of use. Warren was standing near the window while Hartley spoke, not looking at me, looking at the back section through the glass, at the fence line, and the windbreaks and the cattle moving, along the north edge, looking at it the way a man looks at a thing he has already decided to liquidate, not with malice, with the flat assessment of someone doing arithmetic. There's been an offer, he said, still not turning. A pipeline company out of Oklahoma, natural gas. They want easement access and extraction rights on the back section. The money is significant. I asked about my cattle. He said I'd have 12 months to relocate them. I asked to where. He said that wasn't something he could determine for me. I looked at Hartley. Hartley was looking at his folio. The arrangement Ruth set up, I said. When was it added? 2019, Hartley said. It was within her rights as a state holder. I'm not disputing that. I said, I'm noting that it was added 6 years ago without anyone mentioning it to me. Mrs. Alderman, Hartley said carefully, there was no legal obligation to inform you a change to an estate document you were not a party to. Warren turned from the window then. His expression was patient. The particular patience of someone who has had a long time to prepare for a conversation they know will be uncomfortable. Nora, he said, I know this is hard. You've been here a long time. Nobody disputes what you've contributed. But this is a family estate, and Ruth made her wishes clear. He paused. The pipeline deal makes financial sense. The back section was never a productive operation by any standard metric. I said nothing. Outside, I could hear Lily on the tractor along the east fence line. I'd like to think about it, I said. Of course, Hartley said. He produced a card. We want to move toward the state meeting within 2 weeks, given the company's timeline. After they left, I stood in the kitchen for a long time. Then I drove to the back section, not to pace the fence line, not to stand in the field feeling sorry for myself. I drove to the old machine shed at the eastern edge, where the limestone ridge begins, and I moved a case of hydraulic fluid and an old belt off the second workbench and crouched down behind it. The tin box was there, right where it had always been. The lid was rusted but not locked. I carried it to the house and set on the kitchen table, the same table where Hartley's folio had been sitting 2 hours earlier, and I opened it. Inside were 3 folded sheets of paper and a sealed envelope and a photocopy of a document on county stationery. The paper smelled like machine oil and dry storage and 30 years of waiting. I read the letter first. Harold had written it to Daniel, pencil on lined paper, in the deliberate script of a man who did not write often but meant every word when he did. He had dated it August 1994, when Daniel was 16 and had just started spending serious time on the back section. He wrote, I had this piece surveyed in 1987 by a man named Carlton Proves out of Wichita, and what he found underneath the limestone is worth considerably more than what anybody in this family has ever given this ground credit for. There is a natural gas formation running from the northwest corner clear to the county road easement. Carlton's assessment put the production value at something this family would spend in 5 years and have nothing to show for. I know how this family handles money, and I know what would happen if I put this in your grandmother's hands or your brother's. And I won't do that to you, and I won't do that to the land. What I'm going to do instead is file a deed at the county recorder's office that severs the mineral rights from the surface title. Under Kansas law, they can be done. And once done, it is a matter of record that cannot be altered by a will or a family arrangement or anything except a court order. I am conveying those severed mineral rights to you and your lawful heirs on one condition, that whoever holds them must have worked this surface ground in continuous productive agricultural use for at least 20 consecutive years. I believe that will be you. I am telling you this so you know it exists, but I do not want you counting on it. Count on the work. The work will tell you what matters, and the records will hold the rest honest until someone goes looking. I read it twice. Then I opened the other papers. The surveyor's notes were 40 pages, condensed into Carlton Prue's professional summary, a natural gas formation running from the northwest corner of the back section beneath the limestone shelf. Estimated reserves as of 1987. At a production value as numbers put in the range of several $1,000,000 depending on market pricing. The photocopy was a county document. Instrument 8834-71. Filed with the Callaway County Recorder's Office on March 15, 1988. A deed of mineral severance, executed by Harold James Alderman as sole owner of record, severing the mineral rights from the surface title of the back section and conveying them to Daniel Joseph Alderman and his lawful heirs, contingent on continuous productive agricultural use of the surface for a minimum of 20 consecutive years. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. Daniel had worked the back section from 2000 until October 2008. 8 years. I had worked it from October 2008 to the present. 16 years. 24 years total. Continuous and documented. On record with the county's agricultural tax filings and cattle registration and hay production records every single year. The condition was met by 4 years. The morning after I found the tin box, I drove to the Callaway County Recorder's Office at the courthouse in Emporia and asked to see instrument 8834-71. The woman at the counter, Janet Bales, typed the number into her system without expression and pulled it up on her screen. Mineral severance, she said. 1988. You want a certified copy? Yes, please. She printed it. She stamped it. She charged me $8. She had no idea what she was handing me. I sat in the parking lot with the warm paper in my hands and looked at Harold Alderman's name above the notary seal, and I had to breathe through something that was not quite crying and not quite laughing, but lived near both. He had put this in the county records 34 years ago and trusted them to hold it honest. They had. From the parking lot, I called a lawyer in Emporia named Susan Lott. She had handled a contract dispute for me once before, a hay buyer who tried to renegotiate after delivery. I had chosen her because she did not perform. She worked. I told her what I had found and read her the text of the instrument over the phone. She was quiet for 10 seconds. Then she said, "Send me everything. Do not go to that estate meeting without me." Thursday arrived with a sky the color of old pewter. I was up before light, out to the cattle, and back before Lily was awake. She knew something had shifted. She had known since the night I found the tin box, reading in my face the way she had always read weather. She put on her boots without being asked and ate breakfast without asking questions. "You need me there," she said. It was not a question. "Yes," I said. Susan Lott arrived at 9. She drove a practical car and wore a sensible jacket and carried a briefcase that showed its use. We sat at the kitchen table and went through the documents one more time, talking to the chain of title, the mechanism of the severance, the enforceability of the codicil against a pre-existing recorded instrument. "They're going to be surprised," she said. "Warren's going to be angry first. Are you ready for that?" I told her I had been ready for 22 years. Warren and Ben Hartley arrived at 10. 3 cousins arrived shortly after, people from the extended family who had a peripheral claim on the estate and had come to make their presence known. Mabel Kinsey from the neighboring farm came, because I had asked her. I wanted a witness who knew this land and knew the truth of how it had been worked. Warren saw Susan Lott, and his expression shifted. Hartley saw her briefcase, and it shifted more. Warren set both hands on the back of a chair. "I wasn't told you were bringing counsel. I should have mentioned it," I said. "I apologize." He sat down. He was good at not showing what he was thinking. Better than most. Warren's case was straightforward. Ben Hartley walked through the estate documents in the order he had prepared. Main operation to Warren. Surface rights to the back section, reverting under the codicil. 12-month notice period before change of use. The pipeline companies offer $185,000 for easement access and extraction rights. Timeline of 8 months to closing. When Hartley finished, He set down his pen. Any questions from the parties present? I have one, I said. Who authorized a mineral rights survey in 1987? Ben Hartley looked at Warren. Warren looked at me. I'm not aware of a mineral rights survey on record. Hartley said carefully, Then you haven't checked the county recorder's office in the last week. I said, Because I have. Warren leaned back in his chair. I had seen this before. The recalibration. The adjustment that happens when a man who is prepared for one conversation realizes a different one is being had. Nora, he said, patient, measured. I understand you're upset. You have every reason to be. But feelings about a piece of ground are not a legal claim. The estate documents are what they are. I'm not talking about feelings, I said. He looked at me across the table. Across 22 years of Sunday dinners and quiet exclusions, and a particular loneliness of being the person nobody chose. Can you even ride the back section anymore? He said. He said it without cruelty. That was the remarkable thing about it. He said it the way you'd note someone's age, or a decline, as if he were simply acknowledging an erosion that everyone in the room had already privately accepted. The room went quiet. Mabel Kinsey was watching me. The cousins were still for the first time since they'd arrived. I looked at Warren. Ask me again, I said. He blinked. What? Ask me the question again. He held my eyes. Can you ride the back section? Every acre, I said. Every fence line, every soil type, every water table depth, every legal description from the northwest corner stake to the county road easement. I can ride it because I've been on it every single day for 22 years. I paused, and last week I found something out there that changes this conversation entirely. The room went truly quiet then. Not the polite quiet of people waiting for a difficult woman to finish. The quiet of people who have understood, all at once, that they may have missed something of consequence. Susan Lott opened her briefcase. She set a single document on the table. A certified copy of Instrument 8834-71, stamped from the Callaway County Recorder's office. She placed it where everyone could see it, and let it sit for a moment before she spoke. I'd like to direct your attention to a filing at the Callaway County Recorder's office, dated March 15, 1988. Warren glanced at the paper, then at Hartley. Hartley leaned forward. This is a deed of mineral severance, Susan Lott said. Filed by Harold James Alderman in a capacity as sole owner of record for the back section at the time of filing. Under Kansas property law, mineral rights may be severed from surface rights and conveyed separately. Harold Alderman executed this severance in 1988, separating the mineral rights from the surface title of the back section entirely. Warren's jaw was very still. He then conveyed those severed mineral rights to Daniel Joseph Alderman and his lawful heirs, subject to one condition. She tapped the document. Continuous productive agricultural use of the surface by the holder or their heir for a minimum of 20 consecutive years. Mabel Kinsey made a quiet sound at the end of the table. Daniel Alderman worked the back section from 2000 until his death in 2008. Susan Lott continued. 8 years. His lawful heir and surviving spouse, Nora Alderman, has worked the back section continuously and productively since 2008, a period of 16 additional years. Combined, 24 years. The condition specified in Harold Alderman's 1988 deed is satisfied by a margin of 4 years. She set down a second document. The county agricultural records, certified, showing the back section's registered productive use under my name. Annual cattle registration. Hay production records. Agricultural income filings for every year from 2009 to the present. The mineral rights to this back section, Susan Lott said, belong to Nora Alderman and her heir Lily Alderman, free and clear. They are not part of Ruth Alderman's estate. They were not part of the surface title when Ruth inherited the property. Harold severed them from the surface in 1988. The pipeline company's offer to Warren is predicated on Warren holding both surface and mineral rights. He holds the surface. He has never held the minerals. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. Ben Hartley picked up the certified copy. He read it the way a professional reads a document that is delivering bad news, slowly, without expression, checking each clause. The cousins were not looking at their phones. Lily was watching her uncle across the table. She had said nothing since she sat down. She had her father's stillness when something mattered. Warren looked at the document for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice had changed. Not broken, just flattened out, the way a man's voice goes when he is working something through in real time. Harold filed this. He did, Susan Locke confirmed, without telling anyone. He told Daniel, there's a letter. I set the original letter on the table between us. Harold's pencil script on line paper. Warren looked at it without touching it. Ben Hartley asked to step outside with Warren. They were gone for 12 minutes. I counted, not consciously, but the way you count things when the silence is heavy enough to make time tangible. The cousin sat without speaking. Mabel was looking at her coffee cup. Lily was watching the back window. The limestone ridge just visible past the windbreaks her father had planted the year before she was born. When Warren came back, he sat down differently than he had been sitting before. Something in the set of his shoulders had changed. The offer is contingent on unencumbered mineral rights, he said. I understand that. Yes, Susan Lott said. And the pipeline company can extract without the mineral rights holder's consent. That's correct. Warren laced his fingers on the table. He looked at them. I had never in 22 years seen Warren Alderman look at his own hands. He was always a man who looked outward, at the next thing, at the numbers, at the room. Looking at his hands was something else. I didn't know about this, he said. I want that said plainly. I was not trying to sell something I didn't own. I genuinely did not know the mineral rights were severed. I believe you, Susan Lott said. Does that matter here? It matters morally, I said, which is the part you're actually asking about. Warren looked at me then, not the way he had looked at me across Sunday dinners, not the familiar assessment I had learned to absorb without reacting. Something in his face had come undone, not his composure entirely, but the thing beneath the composure, which I had never seen before and had not expected to find. He looked tired, not the tiredness of a man who has worked too hard, the other kind, the kind that accumulates under things. I was going to take this deal, he said. I was going to settle this estate and split the proceeds with the cousins and close it all out, not because I needed the money. I have money. He said it with something close to embarrassment. I was going to do it because I didn't know what else to do with any of this. I don't know what to do with this farm. I never have. The cousins were very still. Mabel had set her coffee cup down. Daniel was the one who knew this land, Warren said. Not managed it. Knew it. He'd walk out there and come back knowing things I would not have noticed in a week of looking. I told myself that was sentiment, that he was attached to a bad piece of ground because he needed to make something of it. I told myself he was wasting his ability. He unfolded his hands. I was wrong about that. I've probably been wrong about more than that. Lily shifted in her seat. Warren picked up Harold's letter. He read it. He read it a second time, slowly. I watched something move behind his eyes that I didn't have a name for. Not remorse exactly. Something older than remorse. The recognition of a truth that has been present for a long time before the person holding it finally turns it over. He knew, Warren said. Grandpa knew what was down there. He had it surveyed in 1987. I said, 35 years. Warren set the letter down with the care of someone returning something they had no right to handle carelessly. And he gave it to Daniel instead of me. Not because Daniel was his favorite. Because Daniel would work it. Nobody said anything. Warren looked at me, across the table, across the distance of 2 decades. I treated you the way my mother treated you, he said. I told myself it was just business, that I was managing an estate, not making a judgment about you personally. But that wasn't true. He was quiet for a moment. I saw you as something left over. Someone Daniel chose that the rest of us never chose. I dismissed your work the same way my mother dismissed it. That was wrong. I had waited a long time for those words, or something like them, not because I needed them to know what was true about my own life, but because there's a particular loneliness in being dismissed by people you've lived alongside for 20 years, and that loneliness had occupied a corner of me whether I wanted it to or not. Hearing it, name did something to that corner. "I know what it costs you to say that," I said. "Thank you. What do you want?" He asked it plainly. No lawyer's framing, just the question. "You have the mineral rights. You have leverage I didn't know existed this morning. What do you actually want from this?" Lily was watching me. I had spent 3 days thinking about that question. Lily and I had talked about it at the kitchen table the evening Susan Lott drove home, sitting with the weight of what we had found and trying to understand what we wanted it to mean. Lily had been clear. I had been slower, because what I wanted wasn't only about money and wasn't only about the land. It was about the work finally meaning something to the people who had watched it all those years without seeing it. "There are 4 things," I said. "None of them are unreasonable." Ben Hartley picked up his pen. "First, the surface title to the back section. Full fee simple. Transfer to me and Lily outright. Not a lifetime provision. Not a codicil contingency. Our names on the deed." Warren nodded once. "Second, the mineral rights documented in our names at the county recorder's office with a full chain of title on record, tracing back to Harold's original severance in 1988. I want that history visible, not buried." Another nod. "Third, if there's going to be a deal with a pipeline company, Lily and I negotiated directly. We'll get our own independent assessment of the formation value. Whatever terms we agree to are ours to agree to, not yours." Warren didn't nod this time, but he didn't object. "And fourth," I stopped there for a moment, because this one had taken me longer to put words to, not because I wasn't sure about it, because I had been carrying it for a very long time, and finding the right words for something you have carried in silence is harder than it should be. I want a written record, signed by both parties, acknowledging that Daniel Alderman worked this land from 2000 until his death, and that I have worked it since, and that this work is the reason Harold's condition was met. I want the Alderman family to acknowledge in writing that this land became what it is because of labor, not luck. Labor. The room held its silence. Warren looked at me for a long time. The cousins were not moving. Mabel Kinsey had both hands around her coffee cup, and her eyes were bright. "That's all," Warren said, not dismissive, genuinely asking. "That's what I want. I'm not here to take the main operation from you. I'm not here to turn this into a legal war that costs everyone 3 years of their lives. I want what Daniel earned and what I earned. I want on the record. That's all." Mabel quietly wiped her eyes. She did it with the back of her hand, hoping nobody noticed. I noticed. Hartley spent 2 hours drafting preliminary terms. He worked carefully. Susan Lott reviewed each section and pushed back twice on language that needed strengthening, and Hartley revised both times without argument. Whatever he thought about how the morning had gone, he was doing his job cleanly. Warren signed preliminary agreement at 1 in the afternoon. At the kitchen table where his mother's estate had been set out in a folio 8 days before, he stood up after signing and looked at Lily. She had said almost nothing in 4 hours of this. She had sat and watched everything the way her father used to watch things, tracking it all. "Your father would be proud of you," Warren said. He said it to her, but he was looking at me. After they left, Lily and I stood in the kitchen together, without speaking. It was a kind of silence that doesn't need anything added to it. Outside, the back section sat under the pewter sky, the windbreaks moving in a light wind off the south. "Grandpa Harold knew the whole time," Lily said. "He knew what the land had, and he knew what Daniel would do with it." I said, "He trusted the county records to hold honest, until someone went looking." "You went looking?" "I almost didn't." "But you did." 3 weeks later, Lily and I met with the pipeline company ourselves. We brought Susan Lott and an independent geologist out of Wichita. The company's original offer to Warren had been built on a surface-level estimate and the assumption that he held both surface and mineral rights. Our geologist's assessment put the formation at a production value more than double what the company had represented. The deal we signed was different from the one Warren had been prepared to accept. Narrower easement, higher royalty rate, extraction timeline subject to conditions protecting the surface agricultural operation, meaning Lily could continue running cattle on the section while the extraction proceeded below. The estimated royalty return over 20 years came to just under $2 million, not counted as a one-time payment. As income from the land, ongoing, the way income from land is supposed to work when it belongs to someone who stayed. Ben Hartley heard the final figure and was quiet for a long moment before saying, "Harold was a clever man. He was more than clever. He was patient. He understood that the land would outlast everyone's impatience if you gave it time and put the right things in the right places." Lily used the first royalty installment to formally purchase the surface title from Warren, which was already committed to an agreement, but which she wanted to pay for rather than simply receive. She said she wanted to buy the land, not accept it as a concession. There is a difference, and she knew what the difference was. She signed the papers with a stillness her father would have recognized from across any room. The summer after the estate settled, I did something I had not done since Daniel died. I rode the back section from the county road to the limestone ridge, every acre of it, on a horse Lily and I had raised from a foal. It was an early August morning. The kind Kansas offers briefly before the full weight of summer arrives. Pale gold light off the ridge, dew still in the grass, the air carrying the smell of hay and limestone, and particular dry sweetness of ground that has been worked rather than simply occupied. I rode the northwest corner first, where Harold's mineral survey had begun 35 years ago. I rode the long fence line along the county road, where Daniel and I had pulled posts in our first summer together, both of us with blister hands and the limestone fighting back. I rode the eastern boundary where the rock teeth pushed through the soil and rose, the stretch everywhere called Worthless, the place Daniel had looked at and seen something nobody else bothered to see. I sat on the horse out there for a while. There are things about working the same ground for 22 years that resist explanation. At some point you stop thinking of the land as a thing you are doing something to, and it becomes something you are in a relationship with. You know its bad moods. You know where it holds water and where it sheds it, where the cattle will drift in September, where the fence needs watching every spring after the frost heave. You know it the way you know a person you have loved through difficulty. Not because it was easy, because you stayed. I thought about Daniel out there, not the grief of him, which I had made a kind of peace with long ago. I thought about his hands on a post driver in the summer of 2001, before we were married, before any of this was decided, the way he worked, the patience of it. He had his grandfather's patience and his grandfather's sense that the land was keeping a record even when no one else appeared to be watching. He had not lived to see it pay out, but he had worked as though it would. That is not a small thing. It is maybe the most important kind of faith there is. Warren called me once, about a month after the estate settled. He did not call to negotiate or revisit anything. He said he had gone out to the back section one afternoon and walked part of the fence line, and that it had not felt like anything else on the property. He said it felt like a place where someone had been paying attention for a very long time. I said, Daniel paid attention, and then I kept paying attention. He said, I know that now. That was the end of the conversation. Warren and I are not close. I do not expect we will become close. But he had walked the back section, and something that felt like the right ending to a story that had never needed enemies. The royalty checks come quarterly. Lily manages the arrangement with the pipeline company directly, with Susan Lott reviewing each annual statement. She has also applied for a grant through the State Agricultural Extension to study the soil remediation potential of the section's alkaline ground. She wants to know whether the conditions that made everyone dismiss this piece for decades could be turned towards something useful, some application she read about in a journal. She is 22 years old, and she is asking the same questions Daniel was asking at 20, which is the best thing I know how to say about her. We hire a part-time hand now, a young man from a neighboring county, who is learning the cattle operation, while Lily handles a business side. The back section runs about 180 head through the summer. We put up enough hay to carry through a hard winter with room to spare. The windbreaks Daniel planted are tall enough to show up on satellite maps. Mabel Kinsey brought me something a few months ago. She had been clearing out her late husband's workshop and found an old photograph with no date on it. A man standing at the edge of a field with one hand on a fence post, looking at something outside the frame. She thought he looked like Harold Alderman. She wasn't certain. I put it on the shelf in the machine shed. The tin box is still on the second workbench. Empty now. The papers filed at the county, and with Susan Lott, and in Lily's files at the house. But I kept the box. It seems like the right thing to keep, the thing that held a record, until someone was ready to look for it. There's a morning, once or twice a year, when the light comes off the limestone ridge at exactly the angle that made Daniel stop working and just look. I have been seeing it for more than 2 decades, and it still stops me. The way the light breaks across the rock. The land showing you, for just a moment, what has been holding in reserve all along. I think of Harold on those mornings. I think of the box under the workbench, patient and waiting. He did the right work and put the right things in the right places and trusted the rest time. He never saw the mineral rights payout. He never saw Daniel work that ground into something viable. He did not live to watch Lily sign her name on a deed. But he understood something about the land and the people who stay with it that neither Ruth nor Warren ever bothered to learn. He understood that working a hard piece of ground for 22 years without recognition is not a failure. It is a record. It is the kind of record that nobody can forge and nobody can alter and nobody can dismiss with a folio and a codicil and a change of use. The back section is still there. The cattle are still moving through it. The limestone ridge still catches a morning light the way it always has. The pipeline runs underground, tending to its own business beneath everything that matters. The land above it does what land does when someone pays attention to it. Daniel Alderman worked this ground and believed in it when no one else would, and the land held the record of that, exactly as his grandfather intended, until the day someone asked the right question. He asked me if I could ride. The answer was yes. The answer had always been yes. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you love this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.